What's up, guys? Nick Whalen here from RotoWire. We're back with 5 more bold predictions for Week 15 of the NFL season. We're actually coming off a solid week with our Week 14 predictions. We will just pretend that I never said Will Levis would finish as a top 5 fantasy quarterback last week. That never happened. I don't think he quite got there in that loss to the Jaguars, but nevertheless, we move on to Week 15 and we start with Jakobi Meyers. Jakobi Meyers is next in line to roast the Falcons secondary this week. All right, so I'll admit right off the bat, this may be partially wish casting because I'll be starting Jakobi Meyers in multiple important matchups this weekend, but I feel okay about it because the Falcons are giving up far and away the most fantasy points to wide receivers over the last 4 games. Obviously, last week against Minnesota, it's going to inflate those numbers just a little bit. 5 touchdowns given up, but they also gave up a huge game to Ladd McConkey a couple weeks ago. Bo Nix completed 28 of 33 passes for over 300 yards against this defense before their bye week. This is a secondary that is just quite literally lost right now. Go look at the highlights from Justin Jefferson's touchdown last week. You got cornerbacks, you got safeties running the wrong way while the ball's in the air. It looks as though Aiden O'Connell is going to have a decent chance to play this week for the Raiders. If it's Desmond Ridder, this might all have to be voided, but I think we're going to see O'Connell. And for Jakobi Meyers' part, he's doing essentially what he always does this season. He's flying under the radar as a rock-solid fantasy option. The guy you never really want to start, but if you have to, it tends to work out okay. He's the wide receiver 23 on the year in terms of total PPR points, and that's with 2 missed games. So he's a few spots higher. If you look at the per week production, he's had multiple 20-plus point games already this season, and this may be the best matchup that he sees all year. So Jakobi Meyers, will say he goes for something like 8 catches, 120 yards, and a touchdown this week against that Atlanta defense. All right, up next, another player that I like this week, Brian Robinson. We're going to say he has a multi-touchdown game for just the second time this year. I was surprised to learn Brian Robinson has only had 1 multi-TD game this season. That came all the way back in Week 5 against Cleveland. He's been a solid back all year, ran wild on the Titans in Week 13 prior to the Commanders' bye. Washington now comes out of that bye. They get a matchup against the Saints in New Orleans. Saints have found ways to hang around with some superior opponents these last few weeks. Obviously, that was not the case last week against the Giants, but they're down so many guys. Olave, Taysom Hill, Derek Carr. They traded away Marshawn Lattimore. They've been one of the friendlier fantasy defenses for opposing running backs this season. 7th most fantasy points given up to the position. Dead last in the NFL in yards per carry allowed to running backs. They've also given up 14 rushing touchdowns to the running back position. That is the 2nd most in the NFL. So I really like the spot for Washington to come out of the bye, extra week to prepare. They're motivated. They need to keep winning to lock up a wild card spot in the NFC. And the Saints are just so depleted. They're back to Jake Haener. They've allowed some huge days on the ground this season to the Rams, the Broncos, the Falcons, the Bucks, the Eagles, even the Chiefs ran all over them. Love the spot for Brian Robinson, especially with Austin Eckler still on IR. We'll see some Jeremy McNichols. We'll see some Chris Rodriguez, but I think this is a Brian Robinson spot. We'll say he has his best fantasy day of the season, topping the 20.3 PPR points he put up in that Browns game. Next on the list, we are going to the showdown between the Jets and the Jaguars this weekend down in Jacksonville. Aaron Rodgers, will say he throws for 300 yards. He does the unthinkable for a 2nd straight week. All right, so Rodgers had his first 300-yard game in 35 starts last week. First one since Week 14 of the 2021 season. So these have been few and far between, to say the least. But he gets the Jags this week, a defense that's actually pretty respectable against the run, but ranks dead last against the pass. That did not change even after they shut down Will Levis a week ago. They're dead last in pass defense EPA. They're 31st in yards allowed. They're dead last in yards per pass attempt, dead last in quarterback rating, 30th in completion percentage allowed, and they've given up 24 passing touchdowns, which is the 2nd most in the NFL. So we have established that this is a very bad pass defense, okay? And I know the Jets keep losing. The offense, I thought, actually looked quite a bit better last week against a very good Dolphins defense. And, at this point, the season's over. They're eliminated from playoff contention for the 14th straight year. I think Rodgers kind of in stat preservation mode at this point. He's trying to audition for wherever he's going to play football, if anywhere, next year. I think they let it fly again this week. Jags are healthy on defense. I think they'll do a decent job slowing down that Jets running game. It's going to be a spot where the Jets have to pass. And the Jaguars just have no answers for a combination like Garrett Wilson and Devontae Adams. Aaron Rodgers puts up a 2nd straight 300-yard game, something he has not done since that 2021 season. All right, next up on the list, we're going to a game that I'm actually very interested in watching this week, Carolina and Dallas. And we're going to say Chuba Hubbard goes wild this week. He puts up at least 150 yards from scrimmage, and the Panthers win that game over the Cowboys. We love this matchup for the Carolina Panthers. They are favored in an NFL game for for the first time in forever. I don't even know when the last time was. At least, I think, 2 years. I don't know. It's been a long time. They are coming off another loss last week, but another really well-played game, I thought, against a great team in the Philadelphia Eagles. They now match up against one of the shakier defenses in the NFL, particularly against the running back position. We just saw Chase Brown have a huge night against this Cowboys team on Monday Night Football, well over 100 yards from scrimmage. We're taking this up a level. We'll say Chuba could get to 150 on this defense. And not only is Dallas bad against the run, but the Cowboys are dead last in the NFL in yards per target allowed to running backs, 8.2 yards per target. That's a good 2 yards above the league average. And again, we saw that with Chase Brown on Monday night. The other key factor here, of course, is the workload for Chuba Hubbard, who played 97% of the offensive snaps for the Panthers last week. Jonathan Brooks, is starting to emerge for Carolina. He retore his ACL last week. He's done for the year. After he went out, Chuba Hubbard took every running back snap the rest of the way. And the Panthers don't really have a clear second option. We'll see if Raheem Blackshear is healthy. He was in the hospital after last week's game. They did sign Velus Jones, ex-Bear, ex-Jag this week. We'll see if they get anything from him. But the bottom line is this is going to be Chuba Hubbard's backfield. And even with a healthy Brooks, he was still dominating snaps, dominating carries over the last few weeks. So I think it's another high volume game for Chuba Hubbard. He carried 20 plus times last week. Carolina, trying to control clock, dictate tempo. Chuba Hubbard racks up 150 yards from scrimmage this week against the Dallas Cowboys. Okay, our last bold prediction for week 15. We're going to Browns Chiefs. Jameis Winston flips the script on KC. He leads the Browns to a walk-off win at home against the Chiefs. So there are a couple levels to this. Not only do the Browns win this game, but we say they win it in walk-off fashion. And, for our last prediction here, we got to get a little wild. But is it really that wild? I mean, the Chiefs are only 4-point favorites. The game is in Cleveland. Kansas City does nothing but play these chaotic last-second games, it feels like, every single week. I know the Browns fell flat last week against Pittsburgh, but I think that should have been a much closer result. The Browns basically played them even when you look at a lot of the team statistics. They were 2 of 13 on third downs. They missed 2 extremely makeable field goals on back-to-back possessions. They muffed a punt late in the game. Jameis threw 2 picks. And still, the Steelers didn't run away from this Browns team. Of course, that's going to be part of the deal with Jameis. You live with the picks. You expect the picks at this point. But I didn't really come away from that game feeling any better or any worse about this Browns team. Jameis is going to continue to hit big plays. He's willing to take chances that a team like Cleveland needs to stay in a game with a team like Kansas City. And this Chiefs defense has really started to fall off of late. I know they played well this past week against the Chargers, but that's a depleted Chargers team without many weapons. The KC pass defense in particular has been a bottom 5 unit in the NFL by DVOA since week 8. Aiden O'Connell almost beat this team. Bryce Young almost beat them. Bo Nix almost beat them. They almost lost at home to Tampa Bay when they were down both of their receivers. This is a team that continues to skate by week to week. And at some point, maybe, I think, the luck is not going to roll in their favor. So we'll say the Browns keep this game close. And finally, the Chiefs are on the wrong side of a last-second score. Honestly, the biggest hurdle in all this may be just asking Dustin Hopkins to simply make a field goal from any distance on the field. It's going to be cold. It's going to be windy in Cleveland on Sunday, but we're sticking with it. Jameis Winston leads the Browns to a walk-off win over the Kansas City Chiefs.